Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator, honorable judges, my worthy opponent, and ladies and gentlemen. In this debate, we, the Nagetive team, will argue strongly that Canada's driving age should not be raised to 18 because such a law will be unreasonable, unfair, and costly. First, Mr. Moderator, driving age in Canada should not be raised to 18 because such a law will be unreasonable. It is true that 16-year-old drivers tend to have more accidents than older drivers, but this is because they're not very experienced at driving. It is not because they're under 18. If Canada raises the driving age, the new 18-year-olds will be the one having the most accidents. Mr. Moderator, experts say that men are 77% more likely than women to kill someone while they're driving. If Canada lawmakers were to use only the statistics to influence their lawmaking, they will ban all men from driving. Age is not a problem. Lack of experience is. Furthermore, Mr. Moderator, several studies suggest that most 16 and 17-year-olds are careful and safe drivers, so it will be terribly unfair to brand all teenagers as reckless and immature drivers and to deny them, all those under 18, the right to drive. Lastly, Mr. Moderator, raising the driving age will be expensive. Many young workers drive their cars to work. However, if the driving age is raised, young workers under 18 will have transportation problem. As most families nowadays have their both parents working, the 16 and 17 years old who have their jobs far from their home would have to use public transportation. But public transportation is not always reliable, especially at nights, the time when these teens usually work as their daytime hours spent in school. Of course, government could improve the public transportation and increases the frequency of night buses, but this will cost lots of money. Before closing, Mr. Moderator, I would like to repeat my points. In my speech, I argue that the driving age in Canada should not be raised to 18 because such a law will be highly unreasonable, totally unfair, and extremely expensive. For these reasons, Mr. Moderator, the driving age should not be raised. This resolution must, therefore, fall. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, now I'll rebut my opponent, Ms. Kitty Ken. First, my opponent said raising the driving age would be unreasonable. But I say raising the driving age will save lives, and that is what is important. Second, Mr. Moderator, my opponent said most 16 and 17-year-olds are good drivers, and it will be unfair to those teenagers who are mature enough and ready to drive. But I say, as Mr. D'Amico said, raising the driving age may seem burdensome and unfair to some teenagers, but we have to remember that this is a proposal about safety, not convenience. Lastly, my opponent said raising the driving age would be expensive, but I say human life cannot be compared to money. Thank you. In October 2013, in Vaughan, Ontario, 16-year-old Joshua Ferrier and 15-year-old Tatiana Souza were tragically killed, and 4 other teens between the ages of 15 and 17 were seriously injured. Excessive speed, according to the police, was a factor. I, however, sincerely believe that age was the most important factor in this tragic crash. Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator, honorable judges, worthy opponents, and ladies and gentlemen. Representing the affirmative side in this debate, I will argue that driving age in Canada should be raised to 18 because such a law makes sense and will save lives. First, Mr. Moderator, human life is important, and we must do everything reasonable to prevent deaths. Studies show that teenage drivers are much more likely to have accidents than older drivers. In the US, more than 5,000 teenagers die from car crashes each year. And in Canada, car crashes are the #1 reason for teenage deaths. In British Columbia alone, 54 teenagers die each year from automobile accidents. The sad thing is that these deaths are all preventable. To stop this terrible loss of lives, Canada needs to raise the driving age. This will lower the number of accidents and will also make the roads safer for everybody. Second, Mr. Moderator, there is no reason for people younger than 18 to have a driver's license in Canada. Most teenagers live close enough to walk or bike to school. Their parents can drive them to school or sports activity or wherever they wish to go. Teenagers also living in Canada are also fortunate to live in a country which has a modern and dependable transportation system. So teens wishing to go somewhere can take bus if their parents are unavailable and if the distance involves too far to walk or bike to school. Lastly, Mr. Moderator, lawmakers in most countries, including Canada, do not believe that 17 and 18-year-olds are grown up enough to drive, to vote, drink alcohol, or smoke. Yet, some of these countries allow them to drive, even though a car can be a lethal weapon when it is in the wrong hands. This has to change. It is time for Canada's lawmakers to acknowledge that 16 and 17-year-olds are not mature enough to drive. Experts explain that their young minds' social and emotional development remains relatively immature and seeks novelty and risk. Experts also point out that the teenage brain is too distracted and susceptible to peer pressure. I sincerely agree and believe that distraction and peer pressure contributed the horrific crash that I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, which took the lives of those 2 teens and devastated so many others. Indeed, Mr. Moderator, the driving age in Canada should be raised to 18 because too many teens are dying needlessly in car crashes. U.S. lawmaker John D. Amico said it best when he stated that raising the driving age may seem burdensome to parents and busy teens, but we have to remember that this is a proposal about safety, not convenience. I agree with Mr. D. Amico. This resolution must therefore stand. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator, honorable judges, my worthy opponent, and ladies and gentlemen. Representing the negative side in this debate, my colleague, Katie Kim, and I will argue that the driving age in Canada should not be raised to 18. But before going any further, I will do my rebuttal. My opponent Ellen said age was the most important factor in the accident in Vaughan, Ontario. But I say that is not what the police said. Police said it was the exceptional speed that caused this accident in Vaughan, Ontario. My opponent also said parents can drive them to school or work. But I say that most families have both parents working and both living in areas with few trains or buses. Teens cannot expect their parents to drive them around forever. I will now continue with my constructive speech. Mr. Moderator, mobility is a right for teenagers. 16 and 17-year-olds need to drive to get to school or work. Many live in areas with few buses and trains, and teens cannot expect their parents to drive them around forever. Most of the activities that teach young people about the world, such as sports, school clubs, bands, and part-time jobs, can only be done if teenagers can drive themselves. Teenagers driving is all about young people making personal choices and beginning to find their own way in life as young people become independent from their parents. This explains why parents are just as opposed raising their driving age as teenagers are. Second, Mr. Moderator, rather than raising the driving age, all provinces and territories in Canada should enforce the graduated driver licensing rules. Last, Mr. Moderator, there are better solutions to the problem of raising teen accidents than raising the driving age. Canada can follow the examples of Before closing, Mr. Moderator, I would like to repeat my reasons for saying that the driving age in Canada should not be raised to 18. First, mobility is a right for teenagers. Second, all Canada can apply the graduated driver licensing rules. And finally, there are better solutions to the problem of teen accidents than raising the driving age. Clearly, Mr. Moderator, there is no need to raise the driving age to 18. This resolution must, therefore, fall. Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, I will now continue with my rebuttal. First, my opponent said the driving age in Canada should not be raised to 18 because study shows that teenage drivers tend to have more accidents than older drivers. But we, the negative team, say that, as I said in my speech, it is true that 16-year-old drivers tend to have more accidents than older drivers, but this is because they are not very experienced at driving. It is not because they are under 18. Second, my opponent said there is no reason that teenagers need driving license. But we, the negative team, say there is a reason why teenagers need their driving license. It is the fact that there is no way for teenagers to get to their work except driving their own car, since most families nowadays have their both parents working, and public transportation is not always reliable, especially at nights. Lastly, my opponent said 16 and 17-year-olds are not mature enough to drive. But we, the negative team, say, Mr. Moderator, as I said in my speech, several studies suggest that most of 16 and 17-year-olds are careful and safe drivers, so they are mature enough to drive. Therefore, the driving age in Canada should not be raised to 18. Thank you.